Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Mikkel Krashovsky, and welcome to episode 76 of That Remote Life podcast, where we hear from location-independent entrepreneurs and professionals so you can learn to quit the cubicle and live life on your terms. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Dr. Emil Hodzovic, or otherwise known on the internet as Emil Goliath. Emil has an amazing background. He grew up playing rugby and then turned his athletic focus on bodybuilding, all while studying and then later working as a doctor in the UK. After several years of working in the UK healthcare system, he became disillusioned with what he was doing and started instead focusing on more of a total health model and began training high-level professionals and location-independent entrepreneurs online. Now, if you're a digital nomad and have struggled with staying fit while traveling, I think you're going to love this episode. Emil and I discussed why most people make staying fit more difficult than it has to be, and Emil also shared his strategy for balancing a healthy lifestyle while enjoying all the culinary experiences that new places have to offer. We also talked about health for entrepreneurs and how to make sure that you're performing at your best, which we all know is so important as digital nomads and entrepreneurs. It's super important to make sure that you're staying at your peak possible level so that you can perform well and work in your business as well as you can. Now, before we jump into this interview, I do want to tell you about my newest project called Nomad Weekly. Now, there's so much going on in the digital nomad world and location-independent entrepreneurship space that it can be tough to stay up to date. And Nomad Weekly is the first ever The Hustle style weekly newsletter for the digital nomad space. Every Monday morning, you will receive a fun-to-read email that brings you the most important things you need to know to get your week started, like global news curated specifically for global citizens like yourselves, information about up-and-coming events and conferences, travel information and updates, reviews of products and services, crypto and financial overviews, and even original articles written by our own writers. If you're a digital nomad or location-independent entrepreneur, this is the email you need every week to stay in the know. And you can sign up for that over at thatremotelife.com/weekly. That's thatremotelife.com/weekly, and it's totally free. So you can head over there, join that, and it will be launching the first week of August. All right, you guys, well, without further ado, let's dive into this awesome conversation with Emil Goliath. All right, well, Emil, welcome to the show, man. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, really, really good here. Looking forward to this.
Dude, I'm so excited to have you on. We connected over the Dynamite Circle. I was about to say the DC, but then I had Dan on the show, and he kept correcting me. He's like, do not say the DC. Nobody knows what you're talking about. You got to say the Dynamite Circle. So, yeah, we connected over there. And I'm really excited to have you on because you are a fitness instructor and you kind of do everything online, which is really cool because I think we've talked about this offline, is that my dad, I have been like pushing him to go remote with his fitness business for the last 4 years. And then he finally did. So I'm really excited to have you on and to just kind of get a little bit of your backstory and, get some health tips for us travelers, because that's really, really tough. So, but yeah, man, to get started, I know that, and for people listening, you have an accent. So you grew up in the UK, right? And that's where you
Yeah,
went to school?
yeah. So actually born in Serbia, so former
Okay.
Yugoslavia, hence the name. And then we moved to the UK when I was 2, and my dad worked there as a doctor. That's why he was studying in the UK. And then we stayed there. Eventually South Wales. That's where I spent most of my time. If I have a few drinks, then the Welsh accent comes out, but most of the time it's relatively normal. And then in the last, I don't know, three years, something like that, I've started traveling and moving around more, and now I've ended up in Lisbon, Portugal, which is a very big turnaround in my life in general. Yeah.
That's really funny that you say that about the accent, because, okay, so you're Serbian. I was born in Bulgaria, and, people are always surprised when I don't have an accent. I'm like, give me a few beers. And I've been told that the Bulgarian accent comes out a bit more. So maybe that's something to. So what what was it like growing up, being from Serbia and growing up in England? I mean, you said you were pretty young. You said you were 2, but
too.
like, did that have any impact, like when you were growing up?
That's an interesting question, actually. I've never really thought about that. But yeah, I was 2, and actually, according to my parents, spoke pretty fluent Serbian at that age. But then, went into the schooling system, and actually, we started in the north of England, so I picked up a northern English accent. And this is probably moot to most people who don't know all the English accents, but very strong. And then we moved to a place in South Wales, and they were making fun of my northern English accent. So I then picked up the local accent there. I must have been 5. And then I moved to a different place in South Wales, and they were taking the mick out of my other Welsh accent. And it was just constant, but never for an Eastern European or Serbian accent as it was. But yeah, I loved Wales a lot. Very close community, lots of beaches. I was literally there from, I think, about 7 to, I don't know, 24, something like that. So really most of my life in 2 cities in South Wales. University, everything. I worked there as a doctor for a couple of years, and then only really moved to where I kind of lived before in the south of England, in Bristol, which is like an hour away from Wales. In the sort of 3 years before I then became a nomad, and then the rest is history. Yeah.
So that's really interesting because, when people ask me what drove me to kind of become, go the digital nomad route. And one of the things that I always felt was like that I didn't have a home in a way. Like when I was in the US, I was always the Bulgarian kid, right? And then when I was in Bulgaria, I was the American kid. And like I think that, like, like having conversations with people, I was like, oh, that's, the fact that like I had that experience and then decided to start doing what you and I do, like that's kind of an interesting correlation. Do you think that maybe you growing up and moving around in that way, do you feel like that maybe that somehow impacted like you becoming a digital nomad and essentially, kind of being homeless in a way now?
Very interesting. So I think because I'm quite a big guy and I used to play rugby, so that kind of smoothed over any of the, Eastern European divide. I played rugby. I was in. It was fine.
Right.
So I never really got the kind of, the Serbian kid. I mean, I got plenty of, jokes and whatever, but nothing significant. And then I think the biggest thing I carried from Serbia was the fact that my parents immigrated, that's the word, yeah. Immigrated from Serbia to the UK. And then they were like, you become a doctor or a lawyer or don't bother. So inevitably I became a doctor. And that was like the biggest thing, like university, super important, stability, get a job. And I'm sure you must have had a similar thing in Bulgaria. You have to do these real things, and everything else is bullshit. Business isn't the real thing. So I just followed that. And that was no brainer. For me at 16, my dad was like, you should be a doctor. And I said, yeah, sure. Okay. It seems easy. My life is sorted. So actually at that stage, I was in for the stability. I was in for buy a house, buy a car, buy a dog, family, kids, pension, not having to worry about anything. So it was the opposite. And it was only after 3 or 4 years of working as a full-time doctor that I started to get disillusioned on many, many fronts. One being I didn't like being told what to do or when to work and had to work night shifts. 2, modern medicine was just putting band-aids on problems. It wasn't really addressing the key, which is lifestyle. And 3, I started to get an insight into the control the government has over people. So it was screwing around with doctors' pensions at the time. And it was just like, your pensions are screwed. And I was just like, well, that's not fair. And that was the first insight I had into that's not fair. So I was like, okay, I'm going to remove myself from this system because it's bullshit, basically.
And why? I mean, I feel like there are a number of ways to move on from that, right? It's like you become disillusioned with the system, you want something different, you're realizing that, like, what maybe the story you've been sold for, your entire adolescence, it maybe isn't true. Why choose to become a digital nomad as opposed to, like, where did that idea come in as the solution for what you're experiencing?
The first move was getting out of the system, so the medical system. So in 2015, I left full-time medicine. I still worked as a locum doctor. I was working in ER. I was kind of picking and choosing shifts getting paid quite well, but I was trying to build a coaching business. So I didn't even know what a digital nomad was then, but I was moving away from what I didn't want to do. And I was sure I didn't want to do it. And then in 2017, a guy who knew me through random connections literally cold called me and said, we're doing an event in Italy. It's a brocation. Called it a brocation. There's I think 8 guys from different industries. We're just going to chill out for 4 days. We're going to, learn from each other basically. And you'll be the health expert, the fitness expert. So I went out to that. And initially I said, I have to go home early. I've got stuff to do. I can only do 3 days. I need to fly out. I'm busy. I'm a busy guy, And while I was there, 2 of the guys were like, right, we want you to start coaching us. And there's this other event in Marbella in 3 weeks' time. And we want you to come on a road trip with us and drive to Marbella. And through making that decision, I realized that if I said yes and did this road trip, I had to cancel shifts. I had to cancel public speaking things. I had to change my whole life. I was shitting myself the whole time. But to do this 3-week trip, I realized if I said no to this, I would be saying no to the life that I wanted, but didn't know up until that point. So I said yes. And then the event in Marbella was an Amazon event. There was 30 Amazon guys living the digital nomads dream, 7-figure plus companies. We drove around in supercars. We went on yachts, Niku Beach. It was like this introduction to abundance, which I'd never seen before. And I was just sitting there shitting myself, hosing cash. No idea what I'd let myself in for, but knew I wanted more of that. So after that, in the end of 2017, I got back after 3 weeks and thought, right, that's what I want. My first goal, 2018, I was going to travel every single month. So every month I left the country, left the UK, and I just made it happen. I went to Bali, Thailand, Ireland, which probably doesn't count, loads and loads of places just every single month. And then in September, I went to DCBKK, Dynamite Circle, Bangkok. And that was supposed to be a 3-month trip, Thailand for a couple of months and then come back to the UK. And my girlfriend said, why are we only going for 3 months? Why don't we just stay out there? And then that became an 8-month trip. Then we got back to the UK last year. I put my house for rent, sold my car, got rid of everything else. And, we moved to Lisbon and went to Asia again. And that was just gone. That was the last 8-9 months.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think that the shift that you're describing is happening more and more, right? As people who, went to college, did the thing that they felt like they were supposed to do, and then went ahead and did the thing they were supposed to do, and they said hold on a second, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. But I think it's very rare that it happens to a doctor, because doctors, one of my friends is in med school right now, and I mean the amount of debt that he's in, to me, I'm just you don't have an option. There are not a lot of things that you can do that can pay off the debt that you've accumulated. So even if he decides, wow, I really don't want to be a surgeon, it's kind of tough luck. Having, now you use your medical expertise in your, business at the moment, but knowing all of this, knowing your experience and kind of what you're doing right now, if you had to go back, do you think that you would still go through all of that to become a doctor, or would you say, now I'm going to skip that?
Knowing what I know now, I would have just bought Bitcoin. But quite apart from that, people ask me, do you regret not having done or having spent 6 years in med school? And actually, I really don't, because one, during university, I was totally cruising. I was very good at passing exams. I was very good at doing the bare minimum to get through. And I was very good at passing exams. I was getting good grades. But I was playing World of Warcraft. I was, working in a gym. I was playing rugby. I was drinking on weekends and in the week, and I was enjoying life, So the fact that I also managed to get a medical degree out of that was pretty significant. And actually now I have my coaching, which is hugely boosted, as you say, by the fact that I'm a medical doctor, and also a supplement brand, which is literally Dr. Emil Nutrition, based on the fact that I'm a medical doctor. I'm sure I would have been fine if I'd gone down a different road, but also this has turned out exactly how it was supposed to, according to the higher powers. So I don't have any regrets, honestly.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're a doctor, and like I think that's very interesting, is that there are a lot of, personal trainers or health coaches, or whatever, word you want to use to describe that online, but very rarely do they also have your background as a doctor. And I think that's really interesting in the conversations that we've had. I mean, so a little bit of background, I went to study biotechnology in college, and I thought like that's what I wanted to do. Maybe I was thinking about like med school perhaps. So like I do still have that interest, even though I did 2 years and I was like, fuck that. But still, like I do have that interest. And so like, when you said that you're a doctor, and like I really love the fact that um and this is something that I've seen with really good doctors as well, is they have an ability to, when you ask questions, they have an ability to not just tell you like, hey, I'm a doctor, listen to me, but they have an ability to like train, like educate you on like, why is this the right thing? Like, what are you actually? So I think that that's really important. But aside from, I would love to dive into Bitcoin here, because I'm very fresh to it. So that was a very kind of alluring, thing that you dropped there. I really want to know what you know. But I do have to ask. So the world is going into a more remote direction, right? Especially now with COVID. I think, what I thought was going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, I think has been accelerated. And I think we're going to see it much quicker. Based on your background as a medical doctor in the UK, and also what you do now kind of remotely, where do you see medicine going in as we move into an increasingly remote world?
So yeah, I think, as you say, trends which would have taken 5 or 10 years to happen have been accelerated. So telemedicine, um, video online consultations, which have been, because medicine is such a traditional area, they've been kind of like, no, you couldn't possibly do it over video. You have to, feel patient and be in the room and all this kind of stuff. But I think that's going to happen, and that's going to accelerate, which is awesome, because the healthcare system in the UK is struggling, and this kind of thing will hopefully ideally help. But actually, I think the other big thing is AI, and at some point the medical profession is going to get severely disrupted by it. It's already starting with things like IBM's Watson, but there's some areas within medicine like radiology, and to a maybe a degree anesthetics, which is what I trained in, that AI can potentially do better even now.
Hmm.
And this is going to rapidly happen. The thing that's protecting it at the moment is tradition and people's fear of robots.
Right.
So it might take more time than other areas and other professions, but I mean, for me, logically, I'm geeky. I love looking at, AI and all that kind of stuff. It seems inevitable. So I think that's going to be the biggest disruption. I mean, yeah, telemedicine is great. That will help, but AI is going to change the world. So we kind of know that.
Yeah, I was reading something recently about, and I think it was specifically radiology, that it's something that would take a doctor like, several like days to like figure out. AI can almost figure out in a few minutes. And I mean, that's both incredible but also kind of scary in a way, because I do think that people still have that like that fear of robots. What do you think is going to take, like what do you think is going to be that like that hinge? Like, where do you think that trigger is going to happen where people kind of like stop fearing it and really adopt it more into in the medical field?
Money, when it
Mm,
becomes infinitely cheaper to see an AI than it becomes to see a doctor, especially with the kind of privatization of potentially healthcare in the UK, and the burgeoning health costs and everything else. Like, the current system can't keep going. So at some point, some infinitely cheaper and equally as effective, or even slightly less effective alternative will come out, and that will drive people to it. And then once that's kind of established a foothold, I mean, it's inevitable, because by definition, it will get better than doctors at doing certain things. And the one big argument is that doctors provide a human touch. They provide the
mhm.
empathy, they provide all of this, but you can train someone in empathy, human touch, and all of that. And you don't have to pay them however much a doctor gets paid. You don't have to train them for 6 years. You just need to train them how to be empathetic. And some people are that already. And then have the AI do the work, spit out an answer, and then this human puppet
Mhm.
does the empathy piece. And I mean, I'm speculating. It's interesting. I don't know, but that's the way I'm seeing it at the moment.
Yeah, it's really I think it's really funny because when I think about like what would be the version of like AI medicine that exists now, and the first thing that came to mind is like, and this probably doesn't happen to you because you're a trained doctor, but I will have something and I'll Google it and I'll go on WebMD and I leave WebMD and
Yeah.
I have 10 terminal diseases that I've self-prescribed myself, and so it will be very interesting to kind of see how long it takes for AI to learn and to kind of like get my stupidness out of it and no, Miko, you don't have leprosy and or
Yeah.
whatever.
That's interesting actually, because the problem with medicine is it's a game of chance. Like, there is a chance you have these ridiculously rare things. It's a small chance, but you can't rule this stuff out. So I don't know how AI will be able to do that, because doctors effectively take risks. When you go and see a GP, he says it's probably not lung cancer, it's probably a cold, which is a very
Mhm.
fair diagnosis. Sometimes it is lung cancer, but it's kind of accepted that there's a margin of error. I don't know how AI will figure that out, or how that will work, or if, the first time an AI messes up, whether that's they try and scrap it or put it back 10 years. I don't know, but that is very interesting, because, medicine is a gamble, and people don't like to admit that or think that, but doctors are guessing, especially in ER and GP, where it's frontline stuff, where you have to make decisions quickly. You haven't got necessarily all the time in the world, or all the resources in the world. And you're just like, I'm going to make a call, and this is what it's most likely is.
Yeah, I think actually I've never thought about that there is going to come a time when AI does take over medicine and it makes the first mistake, right? And like how do we react to it? Because that's also going to happen with like self-driving cars, right? Those are going to happen and eventually one of those will make an accident. It will, make a mistake and hit a pedestrian, or it's going to decide to save the driver instead of, like dodge traffic and hit a pedestrian or whatever. And this is where like I think it's going to be very interesting to see logical people who are like, well, it's going to make mistakes, it's going to get better, and then people who are going to be
Yeah.
like, no, it's the end of the world, all that kind of stuff. um on the topic of, you mentioned telemedicine, which I'm very interested in, obviously, as somebody who travels all the time and I don't have a regular relationship with a doctor. But the other thing that I'm interested in, and I want to hear your opinion on, is medical tourism, right? So for people like us that travel around all the time and we want to, use what's at our resources. So, when you're in Thailand, Thai hospitals and that kind of stuff. Is that something that you think is going to grow? Like, what do you think about that trend?
Um, I mean, I don't know how COVID will affect it now, but I can't see why not. And certainly the image of, Thai hospitals, for example, being horrible, dirty places is not the case. I mean, if anyone's ever been in one, they're literally the most incredible places in the world. They look like, research labs from movies. So I think it's logical that it's going to become a bigger thing. I mean, it's cheap. It's a nice experience, and as travel and stuff gets easier and cheaper, as I said, COVID aside, then I think it makes sense for sure.
Yeah, I've this is one of those ideas that I've tossed around with like friends talking about this, but I would love to see like a service where just like a personal trainer or something that you can hire a doctor and they can, they know all, the best places around the world where you can get certain things, and like I can have a relationship with them and they can all almost be like, "Oh, hey, you're passing through Bangkok, go get your blood work," and then like we can follow it. Like I would love to see that service. I mean, I'll be the first user if it ever comes out.
But
Um,
watch this space. Watch this space.
oh yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, it's totally something I've been like tossing around because like I want to, we've talked about this offline or not on the podcast, but like I've recently been wanting to get more like refocus on my health. Like, I am 27. I'm at that point where my youth won't just, that won't cut it anymore. Just being young won't. And I want to go get my blood work. I want to get all of these things so that I know where I'm at, but I look at what it's going to cost me to do it at a hospital here in the US, and I'm like, absolutely not. Like that's ridiculous. And I think that's the scary thing for most people, even myself, where I've traveled. Like it's still scary to be in that unknown hospital. Like I was in Mexico, and even if a friend's telling me, no, the hospitals are great, I'm like, but are they? But if you have a doctor who's like, I've been there, I know, go to this hospital, I think it will be great. Um, you did mention COVID. I feel like we need to touch on this. There's a lot of stuff flying around about COVID. You've been very helpful. When it first came out, I remember you did a post in the Dynamite Circle as a medical doctor, kind of like looking at all the evidence. What are the things that people at home can do to almost like protect themselves? Not just like, wearing a mask to like, protect everyone around them, but like, how can you boost your immune system? What are some of the things that you personally are doing, for example, in order to, protect yourself and prepare yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the biggest thing, and this is why I left medicine, is that no one focuses on lifestyle. And actually, like having a poor night's sleep has a detrimental effect on your immune system the next day. Being overweight has been shown to be a risk factor for COVID, all these high blood pressure, diabetes, all these things. So this might not be a quick fix. I mean, certainly getting sleep is, but sort out your lifestyle. It's an investment. It will pay dividends for the rest of your life, which will be longer as well. So like, just do that. Just start. You don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to just start. Like, eat some more vegetables, go to bed a bit earlier. Don't say, I'm going to start on Monday. Just start. Don't care what you do. And then with all that aside, I mean, the things I've been doing, I wear a mask, one out of respect of the businesses which I enter. Like if a shop says wear a mask, like I'm going to wear a mask because they're a private business and they're asking me to do something to enter their, so let's just do it. And then I've been using alcohol gel and washing my hands as soon as I get home. And actually, I think that is, without sounding like, boring, but honestly, that's one of the biggest things, because actually, the virus lives on door handles and wherever else, and it lasts days there. So you touch it, you scratch your face, your mouth, that's how you're going to get it. Wash your hands just regularly, just do it. Have some in your pocket, have some at home. And that, I honestly think, is the biggest thing. Like, a lot of people are saying they're scared to go back to the gym. And for me, as soon as it opened, I was straight back in, super cautious with hand washing, because obviously I expect it to be everywhere. But that is in my head, the biggest way that it's going to get into you. Yeah, there's some evidence of it like floating in the air and stuff, and a mask won't necessarily protect you about that, from that. But generally speaking, if the air is circulating and stuff and you're healthy, then the chances are lower. So, and as I said earlier, medicine is a game of chance. All this COVID stuff is a game of chance. Like, you could do everything and get it, and you could do nothing and not get it. You could, lick door handles and not get it. And most of my colleagues in A&E, in ER, have all the PPE, everything, constantly, and half of them have got it, because, that's just how it is. So those are kind of my things. The other thing I did when we were traveling and stuff was I just mega dosed on vitamin C and zinc. There's
Why
some
zinc?
evidence. It's just these. So vitamin C and zinc are the two kind of supplements that there is some evidence that they'll help with immune function potentially. And I'm not going to say they cure COVID like some people are claiming. I'm not going to say that there's any even specific evidence for it, but there is evidence for other immune areas that they shorten the duration of colds and things like that. So for me, they're safe, they're cheap. There's no harm in it. So I was doing that whenever I was traveling, because we had to travel back from Malaysia. And, if I started to feel a bit sniffly, or I'd been around people who were sneezing or coughing, I would just take the dose for 3 or 4 days, just to kind of cover me, whatever that means.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that you're back at the gym, because I just had this conversation with Sarah, my fiance, and because I was thinking about going back to the gym, and now obviously like all these cases are spiking in Ohio and where I am, and I'm just like, I think I need, I don't know if that's a good idea. So what you're saying is that, like, do you wear a mask when you're at the gym, or no?
So we have to wear one as we walk into the gym, and
Uh-huh.
then once we're in the gym, we can take it off. And I've seen different rules in different gyms. You can take it off at the machine, but walking between machines, you have to put it on, and all these different things. So I don't wear a mask in the gym, because that's the rules for the gym. But if there's fans, if there's air conditioning, if there's air movement, then short of someone coughing and sneezing in your face, there's not the air thing doesn't seem like a big risk for me. Now, I'm not a virologist, I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm just,
Right.
yes, I have medical training. Yes, I've worked as a doctor, and I'm applying a hefty dose of common sense.
Right.
And that is my take on it. As I said, washing my hands, I'm super vigilant with that in the gym. Like between sets, as soon as I leave, I'm all over it. As soon as I get back home, I'm all over it. Try and get in the shower straight away, I'm all over that. But like, other than that, like for my mental health, being in the gym is infinitely like more beneficial than this remote risk. And it is still a remote risk of catching COVID and then even then dying of it.
Right. Right. I know that you don't have that you're not an epidemiologist. And like you said, you're using just like a ton of common sense, but I think your common sense is a lot better than like people who aren't medically trained. Like, do you think we're gonna have some sort of vaccine soon? Like, just kind of like what is your expectation of like the next like year, for example? And totally this is just like best guess, I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is the kind of disclaimer. This is not medical
Yeah.
advice.
No, don't worry. I'm just gonna take just this clip and I'm gonna say, "Don't worry, Emil said this." So,
yeah, I mean, so I've got clients all over the world, and I'm seeing second waves in multiple places. So I fully expect a second worldwide wave. It'll be staggered, but it seems like it's happening, and I don't know whether that will cause lockdowns or not. Different countries will respond differently. I mean, parts of Lisbon have been locked down again, so they're going for some partial lockdown kind of thing. As tracking improves, that might change how countries react. As testing improves, that might change how countries react. And also this kind of herd immunity thing, that might change how countries react. Now, we're seeing cases of people getting it twice. I don't know if that's the norm or the rule. I mean, if that becomes the norm, that people can get it more than once, then I mean, we're screwed. But my gut feeling there is that there will be a spectrum of immunity. It's not like you can just get it as many times as you catch it. It'll be kind of a you become more immune over time. This is my gut feeling, or something like that. We don't know yet. And in terms of a vaccine, I mean, it's so hard to tell with stuff like this because there's so much money involved. But I really don't want to, because I try not to read this stuff as much as possible because most of it is bullshit. But I see things saying, we've never had a vaccine against the coronavirus in the past. But then all these companies are saying there's a vaccine coming out, but also they've got an incentive to do that because of the huge amount of money that releasing a vaccine would create, whether it works or not. So it's kind of like, I really don't know.
So there's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus before.
So that's, I mean, as I said, I'm not an epidemiologist. I didn't study this, but the coronavirus is the cold, right? That's the kind of the common thing. And we've never developed a vaccine for it. And admittedly, from a medical point of view, a vaccine for a cold, it's not a very dangerous disease. There's no point. But that said, if they commercially released a vaccine for a cold, I would get it because I don't like colds. So it kind of makes sense that if there was possibility of doing that, they would do it. And the issue is that the common cold or coronavirus there mutates a lot.
Right. So every year you'd need to get a new one, for example, the way with the flu.
That's my understanding, yeah. And whether that's going to be a similar thing for COVID-19, I don't know. So this is where I'm speculating. I don't want to speculate. Like for me, I'm kind of doing what I can. So I'm looking after my health. I'm living my life as normally as possible. I'm mask in hands, and what happens. Like, there's like this Stoic saying, which is kind of like, there's the thing in the world which can hurt you, and then there's how much you can hurt yourself by kind of stressing about it and fighting about it constantly. So there's a thing in the world. It's there regardless. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to stress about it. I'm just going to live, do the sensible precautions. It's a game of chance anyway, and let's play,
Right. Well, let's shift a little bit because I do want to talk a little bit about like fitness and specifically around travel, because I know that's something I've struggled with, traveling and working out and staying in shape. I mean, you became a bodybuilder. So you were, you were overweight and then you became a bodybuilder. That's a pretty big shift. So you obviously know a lot about exercising and gaining muscle and all that kind of stuff. What would be your tips for anyone who's kind of trying to both travel and also still like, have gains, so to say, at the gym? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've managed it,
Hmm.
Um, I mean, so first off, just for health, it doesn't matter about the gym. You just need to do some sort of physical activity, some sort of movement. And in that regard, it becomes easy. But what happens is when people are in one place, they have their routine running or whatever it is. And then they move to a new place like Thailand and they're like, no, it's too hot to run. And then they give up.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the way to think about it is, okay, for my absolute minimum, I need to do 3 bouts of 20-minute exercise every week, whatever that is for you. It could be one, but call it 3. So in Ohio, it's running. In Thailand, it might be 1 swimming, 1 yoga, and 1 gym session. In Bali, it might be 3 home workouts at 6 a.m. when it's still cool. So
Hmm.
it's almost like, and in Malaysia, it might just be walking, and that's also fine. So it's kind of regressing to this absolute baseline, this minimum viable dose of health that you sustain wherever you are. And then from there, I don't know if you saw my free mastermind, but there's the slider kind of, you can slide the optimization up. You can start increasing your protein, developing a proper workout, progressive overload and everything else. But then as soon as shit hits the fan, because it does, you just go back to your absolute baseline. And then from a practical point of view, like when I land in a place like Chiang Mai, Thailand, for example, I locate a gym in advance. The day I land, I sign up for it to reduce the friction as much as possible. I order protein powder from Lazada so it arrives when I'm there. I just make this, I just make it as easy as possible. And then, I have a program already in, whether I've written it myself, or whether I've just asked, hired someone to write it for me, just again to reduce the friction. And then I try and, again, I have this bare minimum. It might be 5 times a week when I'm in the UK, but I'm just like, okay, I'm going to go at least 3 times in Thailand because I know it's going to be busy. But I just try and reduce the friction as much as possible. Pay, if there's a gym 2 minutes away, which costs twice as much as a gym 20 minutes away, I'm just going to pay for the gym 2 minutes away because, this is one of my key values. This is one of my priorities. So it's worth the money. I'm much more likely to train. So it's a case of prioritizing it and then just planning for it. And I mean, make the environment as conducive as possible to the outcome you want to achieve.
I think that's a really interesting concept of like having this baseline that isn't zero, because I think that happens to a lot of people is they like,
Yeah,
maybe when they're at home, they're exercising and they're being healthy, and then the moment that like things switch and they go abroad, that they go down to like just sitting on the couch, and they don't have that baseline. And yeah, maybe something easy like running that you can do everywhere is a great baseline. I was, I got a TRX. I'm trying to add that into my baseline, even if it's just, I actually use it for like, I don't like to run in like, I'm trying to figure out my sort of routine. I'm not a, I like exercising in the morning, but not too much because mornings are also like my highest energy time when I
yeah.
like
Same.
to, work the most. So I'm trying to do like a little bit of TRX in the morning and then leave like, just to get, kind of like the blood pumping, and then, leave like the heavier workouts, like a long run or something like that for the afternoon. And the TRX has been phenomenal for traveling with. I thought that it'd be a bigger pain in the ass, and it's not. Like you just throw it in the bag and it's super easy. So um I've been a huge fan of that. Do you have any tips for, because I know the thing that kills me when I go to a new place is that any sort of diet that I was trying to stick to is just out the window. Like when they got some delicious foods like laying around. So when I'm in Eastern Europe, like those pastries, man. Like, everybody
Yeah,
talks
yeah.
about the French pastries, but you go to like, a country like Bulgaria, I'm sure Serbia as well, like bread everywhere and it's all so good. What do you what are some of your tips about that around like sticking to a diet even when you are moving around? There's delicious things everywhere.
Yeah. So again, theoretically, the concept I adopt is this kind of, I call it the physiological blueprint, and it's your absolute minimum effective dose for maintenance/progress. So for most people, that's just adhering to a calorie value as an average over the week. So say your maintenance is 2,000 calories a day, you stick to 2,000 calories, so 14,000 calories a week, which in itself gives you crazy flexibility, because on travel day you can fast and eat 0 calories, which means on Saturday you can have 4,000 calories and still hit your weekly average. So what I tend to do then is I have that in my head, and I skip meals which I don't care about. So when I'm traveling, very rarely do I want to eat breakfast. Lunch, I'm usually working or about to train, so I keep it super lean, like chicken and salad or just another shake. I literally bare minimum. And then in the evening, inevitably, I'm going to eat out. Inevitably, there's going to be a social occasion, or I'm going to want some beer or something. And then if I kind of minimize the day and maximize the evening, I've got like, even on a 2,000 calorie diet, I've got, I don't know, 1,700 calories for the evening. And then as long as I'm optimizing my food choices for enjoyment, I can enjoy anything I want and still enjoy life, and still eat what I want and still stay healthy and in shape. Because I mean, the problem that people have is when they're on plan, and then when they're traveling, they're like, fuck it, doesn't matter.
Right.
And actually that causes people to eat shit that they don't even care about. So like smashing a box of Oreos in the apartment, no one wants to eat a whole box of Oreos. You eat it because it's there. You eat it because you're free, you're off plan, whatever. No one cares. Like, you eat the first one and it tastes amazing. The other 30, you don't even taste, right? So, get rid of that kind of stuff. When you eat out in the evening, pick exactly what you want. Eat just that. Like, if there's shitty bread on the table, don't eat it. If it's amazing bread, eat it. If there's a massive thing of fries, I mean, yeah, the first few taste amazing. The rest of them you're eating out of habit. So it's kind of starting to make choices to maximize enjoyment and to get rid of shit that you don't need. And what I usually find with my clients is they get to eat what they want and still make progress, or at the very least sustain where they're at, just by making these choices.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that habit that was like instilled in them from their parents of like, finish everything on your plate, whether you're full or not, like finish it. They're starving kids in Africa thing, which I was always like, okay, like how does this help them? This there's not going over there. Like, what is and I think that's been like super unhealthy. And then like the other thing is like, I don't know if they do this in the UK or not, but like serving milk with lunch here in American schools, like when I found out just how like fattening that is, like, not only is milk super fattening, but also like to eat it with lunch. So I think that there's all of these things that have been like almost made a habit for us. And now there's all of these adults that grew up with this terrible, eating, ideologies. And so I think people really struggle with that. And like, it's super easy in concept to say, hey, these first 5 fries were really good, but I'm not going to eat the rest because I don't want them. Like, I feel like that's so difficult, but when you do figure it out, it can be really advantageous.
Honestly, it's a skill like any other. And here's a great example. So for most of my life, I ordered a whole pizza in a restaurant, ate the whole thing, felt a little bit sick at the end. And then I was like, okay, I know that a whole pizza makes me feel a bit sick, so I'm going to eat less than a whole pizza. So then I eat half a pizza and I say, this is perfect. And then I have another slice, and then I start talking and eat another slice, and I finish the pizza and I feel a bit sick. And it took me years to work this out. And then I suddenly started saying, why don't we order a pizza, me and my girlfriend, and share it? So now we share a pizza, the perfect amount. We don't feel like we're not getting enough. We don't feel like we're depriving ourselves. It's literally beyond perfect. And we end up perfectly full at the end. Like, game changing. So it's almost getting into it's a skill to learn. You need to nail it, but you only need to nail it once. The other one, I always used to order large of everything because I'm a big guy. I need large. It took me a while, but then I figured out I could order medium and be absolutely fine. And again, it took me years to figure this out and actually implement it. And then once I did, my life became infinitely easier. So yeah, I mean, with the fries, just every time you do it, I have this like process. I say, look, just experience what you're going to do. The fries, observe yourself. You're like, I should stop now. I should stop now. I should stop now. I should stop now. And then don't judge yourself. Just see what you can learn from it and see, okay, this is interesting. I kept eating the fries, even though I knew that this was pointless and I couldn't taste them and they tasted like shit. Next time I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try something else. And then next time, try something else. Again, you'll fuck up. Don't judge yourself. Just see what happens. And then over time, it might take 10, it might take 100 times. You only need to nail it once. Once you've nailed it, you're eating the optimal number of fries for your enjoyment and saving like 800 calories. So best of both worlds.
I think there's something around becoming more conscious with what you eat, because like I love pizza. Like that's like at first I was really embarrassed to say that my favorite food is pizza, because it's almost kind of like simple, like, come on, like be better. But I don't know, I love pizza, man. And so I've been watching, I don't know if you've ever seen this online. There's the founder of Barstool, which is not something that I watch or read or anything like that, but he does these hilarious pizza reviews all over the US. And I'm trying to be healthy, but there's this amazing pizza place just down the street from us. And so I've been watching this guy's pizza reviews all fucking week. And I'm like, I really want a pizza. Like, in this really good pizza place right there. So my fiance was like, we have these like 0 carb like wraps. And she's like, well, why don't you, just put some sauce on that and some cheese and some pepperoni, just like, make it here. And I'm like, that's going to suck. Like, I would much rather, like be really healthy for like these 3 days and then go and enjoy the really good slice of pizza, because that low carb wrapped pizza is going to taste like shit. And I'm still going to want that pizza.
Yeah. I've got this concept of fuel and feast meals. So most of the meals in the day and the week, you don't give a shit about. You're eating them because you need to eat, you need fuel, protein, whatever it is. So for these meals, they're tasty, but they're quick. I don't really care about them. And I keep them super lean because I don't care about them. So these are my chicken salads and my protein shakes. And then I have feast meals where I do care about the food. And when I care about the food, I'm going to make sure it's the best. If I'm going to eat a pizza, I'm going to get a really good pizza. And then the key then is to, be mindful about it. And again, stop when you stop enjoying it, because actually overeating is scarcity mindset. What you're telling yourself is, I'm never going to have this pizza again. So I need to eat as much of it now because I might starve for the winter or something. It's like it's like same as a buffet. You're at a buffet, you eat as much as you can until you feel sick because, you want
to get every dollar's worth. Yeah.
Exactly. It's total bullshit. For us as entrepreneurs, it's something that you need to get rid of. Absolute crap. And going back to what you were saying before, as soon as you order some food, it's wasted. So it's wasted whether you eat half of it and throw it away, or whether you eat all of it and then have to burn it off your ass. So it's wasted. So get into the habit of leaving what you don't want. And that's a crazy skill, because you've been given this arbitrary portion, which is probably too big. So why are you eating the whole thing just because someone else has said you need to eat this whole thing? Isn't it funny how 10 people at the table, all different shapes and sizes, genders, whatever else, are all eating the exact same size meal? So slow down, be mindful, optimize the enjoyment. And when you're full, literally the second you're full, get rid of it, because you'll keep eating out of habit and boredom. Put a napkin on it, call the waiter, waitress, ask them to take it away, get rid of it. It makes your life so much easier.
You mentioned entrepreneurs, and I think that I'd love to get your opinion on this, because, we're both entrepreneurs. A lot of people who are listening are entrepreneurs. And in a way, I think of entrepreneurs a little bit like athletes, like they're always trying to think about like, how am I in my optimal position, like shape and like energy level so that I can perform well. And I know that you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So what are some of the things that people who do own their own businesses, who do want to be almost in like peak performance for their business, to create, to do all of that kind of stuff? What are some of the things that, people should be doing in order to be able to really be in it, to really have the best performance possible?
So the biggest thing with entrepreneurs, like athletes, is it's all or nothing. They're either doing everything perfectly or they're not doing anything at all. And that's the problem with this kind of, this huge back and forth. People try keto and it works for 4 weeks, and then something breaks because they travel or business stress or whatever else, and they go back to doing zero. Then there's no in between. And actually the best thing entrepreneurs can do is just start. Again, start to build this baseline, figure out what's the absolute minimum I can do to start being healthy. What's the minimum exercise? It could be 10 push-ups every morning. I work through this with every single client. It's like, right, what's the minimum that you can promise to me, even if your business exploded next week and you had to work 70 hours, what exercise could you promise me? How many steps could you promise me? Now let's do that. Let's start from there and build up from there. And same with food. Like, food doesn't have to be black and white, good and bad. It's all a spectrum. It's all good. So let's start from the absolute minimum. And that might mean have 2 beers instead of 3. It might mean have some vegetables with your meals. Try and have some protein with your meals. I'm not saying eat less. I'm just saying try and focus on protein and veg instead of just a pile of bread. Like, this is exactly what I do. I say, right, I want to see a week of what your normal life is. And then I want to make 1, 2, or 3 of the smallest changes possible that are going to start seeing progress. And people are like, well, this doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. And I'm like, perfect, because you can stick to this forever. And those little changes, you probably don't even care that they're not there anymore. And that's the key. Like, we've worked together to figure out these little things which they don't give a shit about, and is actually causing them to drop a pound or 2 in a week. And they're like, I can do this forever. And I'm like, yeah, if you do it for another week, you'll drop another 1 or 2 pounds, and then another 1 or 2 pounds, and you didn't have to cut out carbs. So little changes layered on consistently in both exercise and nutrition is the fundamental. And ideally focus on the biggest levers. Like, don't worry about if you're eating after 8 p.m. Like, that's not causing you to be overweight. You're just eating too much. So, eating after 8 p.m., if that's the only time of day you can eat, that's fine. Just let's reduce the calories a little bit. Just stick to the big wins, the 80-20. We love 80-20 as entrepreneurs.
What do you, I mean, and it's very funny that you said that entrepreneurs as personalities either go all in and they like nerd out, or they don't do anything. And so I am curious, because with health, there's so much. Like, is keto good or is it bad? Or is like, don't eat any fats, but then like the other person is saying like, oh, fats are great, eat more fats. So there's all of this conflicting information. And as entrepreneurs, we love to measure things. And there's also all of these other things that you should be watching, your weight, your HRV, your VO, like there's all of these things. If there's a few things that somebody should almost watch to make sure that they're healthy, because this is one of the things, like, I have all these apps and they're giving me things. I'm like, I don't know what the hell this means. So what are some of the things that people can actually like look at as like analytics, right? Like, if you're going to be looking at your business's analytics, is there anything that maybe 2 or 3 things that somebody can kind of like measure and kind of say like, I'm healthy or I'm not healthy and I need to change something?
Yeah, so that's very, very interesting. And actually, my biggest job as a coach is to get rid of a lot of information. Rather than giving more, it's actually removing it. We know what is healthy. We know eating too much is bad. We know vegetables are good, generally speaking. So actually, my job is to say, right, all of this is bullshit. Let's just focus on these things. And then actually that gives people the confidence to not worry about 90% of the crap. And I have a spreadsheet, and I start from like the left, and these are the most important things. And if you're only going to track 3 things, track these. And then after that, we can go crazy. We can, go geek out forever. I mean, I've got my Aura ring. I love that kind of stuff.
I saw that. Yeah.
But, if you're not nailing these basics, there's literally no point in anything else. It's like in a business, if you're not, if you've not got any cash flow or any profit, then there's no point in worrying about which email provider you're going to use. Like, it's moot, right? And this is what deciding whether to do keto or vegan is, if you're not nailing the basics. It's exactly that. So, I mean, literally, if someone is overweight, a daily weight with an average over the week, a daily calorie intake with an average over the week, and then I get people to track protein. And I don't often set a goal for protein. I just say, try and eat some for every meal. And by tracking it, you'll automatically start to increase it. And then on top of that, just try and eat some vegetables for each meal. And those are kind of the baseline. And then from there, you can track, sleep, HRV, fatigue, hunger, happiness, 1,000,001 things. Carbs, fats, whatever else. But if you just track those 3, daily weight average over the week, daily calories average over the week, and protein, then you're 90% of the way there. If you want to track daily steps and average it as well, great. And actually, to go there with one of the biggest mistakes or things that confuse people is tracking exercise calories. My recommendation, don't. It's horribly inaccurate. It builds a horrible mindset around exercise, that it's for burning calories. And when I track exercise with clients, I just say 60-minute weights workout, 20-minute run, 25-minute swim. That's all I want to know. I really don't want to know your calories, and I don't want you to document it. And I certainly don't want you to take it off your calorie total for the day. You know, that's all bullshit, basically. It's really, it takes you down the wrong path.
That's interesting, because I'll go on these like runs, and if I like, I've been trying to like up my running, and if I don't hit like a certain amount of like calories, burn them like shit, that I almost like didn't complete the workout for today, because like that was my goal. So I can see that being an unhealthy mindset. You mentioned sleep, and it's something that I struggle with, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with as well. So I think we should, kind of chat about it a little bit, because you get excited, you're working on something, it's either like on your brain and like you can't go to sleep or whatever. Like, what are some of the tips that you have for, kind of increasing, like having better sleep, that kind of thing?
So the first step is realizing that sleep is not a hindrance, it's essential. And the best way I found of relaying that is by watching the Matthew Walker and Joe Rogan podcast or YouTube thing. Just Google them. It's a 2-hour thing. And basically after that, you will realize that you need to go to sleep, and you need to sleep enough. And literally I was doing night shifts almost exclusively, because it meant I could work in the day. I was on my business, and I watched that podcast. And I think within 6 weeks, I canceled all my night shifts and was just doing day shifts again, which I hated, but I just couldn't, it didn't fit with my vision of myself. So the first step is to realize it's important. Once it's important, the next biggest thing is just to be in bed long enough to sleep. Like, people are like, oh, what's a sleep hack? What can I do? Do I need to get rid of EMFs, or do I want blah, blah, blah? But they're going to bed at 3 a.m.
Right.
And it's like, right, step one, go to bed at 11 p.m. And if you're in bed for 8 hours, there's a chance you'll be asleep for 7.5 of them, So that's literally the first step. And to be honest, I can talk forever about sleep. There's 1,000,001 tips and things, but just being in bed long enough will fix a lot of the problems that people have. And then what I find with health as well is you're either spiraling upwards or spiraling downwards. As things start to go together, you're improving. If things aren't improving, they're getting worse. That's just the fact. You can't stay steady or maintain. So if you start, looking after your diet, exercising, that will help with sleep. And then by sleeping more, that will help with motivation for exercise and, willpower around diet and all that. And they kind of start bouncing off each other, and your sleep will improve. Not after a day, but after a week or two, it'll get better. And then as you get into routine and rhythm, everything will start to get better. And just nailing those 3 things in the most basic sense will honestly make you superhuman compared to the rest of the world. And people are like, how can I get the edge? Honestly, eat well, exercise regularly, and sleep, and you will be a superhuman compared to the rest of the world. Because no one does it. Literally no one does it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that everybody knows they should be doing, and they want to do, but I think it almost like takes time for that superhumanness, that feeling to like, to like, the same thing as business, right? Is like, it takes a certain amount of time for you to just be like head down working with no benefits until then, like, you do see the benefit, right? And most people don't make it over that hump, which is, it maybe you fall off the wagon a couple of times until you learn to like, make it over that hump. But Emil, I want to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I can also talk about this all day, so I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're in Lisbon. It's Friday. You probably want to go out. But before we jump off, what are you working on right now? You mentioned you do coaching. If people listen to this interview and they're like, I need some help with my health, my fitness, where can they find you? And what kind of services do you offer?
Yeah, so best bet is to find me on Facebook, Emil Goliath. I think there's only one, and you'll recognize me in the photo. And then I've recently launched an academy, which is kind of the evolution of my coaching, and it's basically healthevolved.academy. And you can check it out. There's a landing page, and as I said, if you have questions, hit me up on Facebook. To be honest, drop me a message. I'm on there most days, so that's probably the best bet.
Yeah, I will. you're going to be able to find all the links in the show notes. And you also mentioned that you have supplements. What kind of supplements are those, and where can people find those?
So yes, Dr. Emil Nutrition is
Mm,
the kind of the supplement umbrella. And then there's kind of a more bodybuilding line called Goliath by Dr. Emil. To be perfectly honest, we've just had a huge kind of behind the scenes change up. So right at the moment, there's 6 products. And over the next 6 to 12 months, it's going to go crazy. So at the moment, we're mainly on Amazon. If you search Dr. Emil Nutrition on Amazon, you'll see some of our products, and they're totally crushing it. They're really, really good. But you watch this space, because literally over the next 6 or 12 months, things are going to go crazy with those, and we're going to be covering everything and expand.
mm. Awesome. Well, Emil, thank you so much for coming on. Congratulations on all of your success. I love all the information you're putting out there. I think it's really important stuff to talk about. And I think that, our personalities sometimes forget it, and we shouldn't forget that. So thank you so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure, man. I love talking about this stuff. So yeah, anytime.
All right, brother. Well, enjoy.
Thank you.